welcome everybody to this breakout session of our AAG seminar series today. I'm Nicole Stephensen. Before we get started, I would like to just take a critical and important moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we all meet today, and to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Now, I am here as a delighted moderator for this wonderful session. For those of you who know me, you'll know that I'm all about privacy in practice and getting down to the practical brass tacks of getting it right in terms of protecting personal information and ensuring that we meet community expectations in our deployments of technologies in particular. And today I'm so delighted because we have two wonderful speakers with us. First, we have Elma Hajric, and she is from Arizona State University. And we also have Rob Nichols from the University of New South Wales. And I'm not going to get into introducing them because I feel that they deserve the opportunity to fully explain who they are, why they're here in context, also so that you don't hear from me for the whole session, but you hear from the people that we've gathered to listen to today. So without further ado, I will pass over to Elma.
So my name is Elma Hajric. I am an NSF NRT. That's a trainee in the Citizen-Centered Smart Cities and Smart Livings grant at Arizona State University. I'm a PhD student in human and social dimensions of science and technology, and I research data rights from more of a human rights perspective, so surveillance and privacy and ownership. And what I want to talk about today is geosurveillance and the smart campus. And we can dive into a discussion about the ethical considerations of data rights. So to set this up, what is a smart campus? To answer that question, we have to know what a smart city is. The term smart city is a very ambiguous term. It does not have a clear definition, but it usually involves interconnected devices and sensors operating on a single network within a city. It features a techno-utopian promise of technologies often embedded in a top-down fashion, and the lack of citizen input from this kind of top-down fashion ultimately leads to failure. You can see this in Sidewalk Labs as the work of Shannon Mattern and Bianca Wiley shows. Examples of smart city technologies include facial recognition, autonomous vehicles, sensors such as traffic or weather, and it usually includes the concept of big data as a central foundation of a smart city. It often adopts techno-solutionism as an approach where technology is thought to solve problems like increased surveillance under an imaginary of safety, to which I ask the question, safety for whom exactly? Sorry about that. So what is a smart campus then? A smart campus can be thought of as a micro city. It's a testing bed of smart technologies that can offer the benefit of innovation, of research for students and faculty, and lucrative marketing for drawing talent to the school. Examples of smart campus technology includes COVID tracking health checking apps like ASU has, biometric tracking surveillance. Some schools offer during the pandemic biometric trackers that students had to wear. ASU did not do this. We had Wi-Fi based location tracking that would check if students were answering the question of, have you been to campus lately, honestly. But with that, there were problems also if you were just passing campus in your car, on a bicycle, and not actually on campus, it would also register you as having been on campus. And on the right, there's a picture that shows kind of the map and how sensors can be helpful with parking, with buildings, knowing how many people are there, how many spots are open. And you also have these sensors that can help with shuttle tracking, knowing when buses can come. And other examples of technologies are also the ID card NFC readers that enable building access. And something new at the ASU campus are blue emergency lights being replaced with IoT sensor poles. So what are these sensor poles? Could you guys see my stuff before? I just got a notification that was only showing now.
Yeah, we can see it, and we have been able to.
Okay, good. Sorry.
Yeah, same here.
Sorry, ASU is replacing these emergency blue lights, which resulted from a federally mandated requirement called the Clery Act of 1990. It asked for universities to have increased accountability and transparency and collect more data for responding to issues around sexual violence and deaths on campus. So blue lights are expensive to maintain. They usually have a call box where you can press a button and the button calls police. And they've been pseudo helpful towards preventing sexual violence, and it's more of an imaginary of safety that continues this techno solutionism. This is also not a new concept. There are previously deployed smart streetlights that offer the same cost savings, public-private partnerships, and police and all-in-one surveillance. The IoT sensor poles also have potential to monetize data. And what's unique about student data is you have these data sets collected over a longer period of time, which is what makes them valuable and what makes the AI more reliable for the uses that it needs. On the right is a photo of an emergency blue light pole. And these are some headlines questioning the effectiveness. Some campuses have gotten rid of them altogether, like in Colorado on Boulder campus. There were a lot of prank phone calls. So they just got rid of them. They're very expensive to maintain, and it makes sense to upgrade them to something else. But what's in a smart pole? This is one of the 6 smart poles currently in deployment stages developing at ASU. And it has LiDAR, weather sensors, voice detection, and AI-equipped surveillance cameras that link to the police on campus. Again, this is not a new concept. There are smart streetlights, police surveillance poles, and the EFF has a lot of resources that identify the different components on here that relate to surveillance. So some kind of topics that I'd love to get into for a discussion are the panopticon of surveillance that this creates, or the illusion of transparency that may be offered without open access to some data, but wouldn't some of the data be proprietary and inaccessible? For example, the ISP providers. Who owns the data? How does one opt out? These are just some of the ethical considerations that I'm questioning. Counter surveillance is often not considered in the deployment of these devices. For example, in San Diego, they deployed the streetlights and they ended up being pushed back on by activists, by students. Also, how does the power asymmetry that we see in smart cities play on campus? Or the student being viewed as a consumer? We often talk about this with citizens being viewed as consumers instead of citizens and belonging to the city. What then makes it appropriate for the student to become a consumer, or like the differences between students having access to fight back on campus versus the citizen having access to city officials? Those dynamics, I think, are very different on campus. The facial recognition and AI bias has been well researched to show detrimental effects to human rights and dignity, with examples of Virginia Eubanks, Ruha Benjamin, Simone Brown, Sophia Noble, to name a few. It creates disproportionate effect on minoritized and vulnerable populations. So there's a potential for this to negatively affect students from certain backgrounds and religions more than others. Also, could certain researchers be closely watched due to the nature of the research? And campuses are really able to act as unregulated test beds with a lack of regulation that applies directly to those campuses, and being able to be testing technologies in the name of research. And I think it attaches to some of the pandemic digitalizations that we've seen. So those are just some points that I'd love to open up a discussion on, and I'll end there. Thank you.
That was so great, Elma. And what really struck me is the potential not only for students to be consumers, right, in this case, but for students to be the consumed. And that's something that always concerns me from a privacy perspective, is reigning in that really dangerous potential.